It's got to happen, guys. It's just got to happen. It's just a few things that I want to read before the year's over. And the number one book that I most want to get to and feel like just has to make it onto the TBR and get read, whether it's on there or not. Can you guess what it is at this point? Hello, and welcome back to my chaotic boxed book room. I don't know. It's the living room. The plans are finalized. The bookshelves will be built, but not for a few months still. In the meantime, I'm coming today with a 10 before the end video. I thought I did this video last year, but I looked and I couldn't find it. I think I just did the end of the year book tag, and I may have mentioned in it my 10 before the year. This year they're separate, so you may have already seen my end of year book tag, in which case I've mentioned at least one or two books that I want to finish before the end of this year. This time I'm going to share all the books that I hope to read and get to and finish before the end of the year. Now, given my recent months of reading, these should probably be the only books on my TBR from now until December 31st, but they probably won't be. Needless to say, these are the books that I am going to hold as priority and pick if they come up or something. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, let me share the books. I have them going from number 10 to number 1, kind of sort of in order of preference. Yeah, I guess. And the first set that I'm going to start with are the books that are part of book projects. So book projects that I really feel like, ooh, I really want to get to the rest of this project sooner than later. So book number 10 is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This is a book that I was inspired to read after reading Oblomov. While I was reading that book, I had quite a few people mention to me that the premise of it reminded them of My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I know nothing about this book other than that maybe a year or so ago, it seemed like everybody on BookTube was reading this, and that apparently it is like Oblomov, where at least the beginning premise is about a young woman, I'm assuming, who just decides to rest and lay about. I don't know. I've heard very mixed things about this. Only a couple of people have said they like it. A lot of other people were like it was going pretty well until the end. So we'll see what I think, but it's number 10 on the list. Book number 9 is Main Street by Sinclair Lewis. I want to read this book after having read And Ladies of the Club, which actually was the author Helen Hoover Santmeyer's response to this book. I did not like And Ladies of the Club. I read a large chunk of it and finally just DNF'd the book because I just couldn't take another 500 pages, and that's how much I still had left after the first 900. But not only that, I was very curious because she set out to do one thing and I thought she failed. And you can see my weekly wrap-ups where I kind of vent about that at more length. But anyway, because her book she wrote in response to this one, I really wanted to see what the original book was like. Book number 8 would be finishing or at least continuing in my book project on Nat Turner. Earlier this year, or was it the end of last year, I read William Styron's book on Nat Turner and yeah, didn't like it. And I still get comments on that video, which I appreciate. And yeah, so I want to read this book in the matter of Nat Turner, which is a speculative history. This is a nonfiction work, and I really want to get to this book before I forget William Styron's book. I'd love to forget that book, but anyway, while it's still floating around somewhat in my mind, I would like to get to this. The next two books I have on this list are both books that are either parts of buddy reads or basically have been recommended to me by viewers. So the first one, book number 7, is actually a book that was gifted to me, and that is The Doll Maker by Harriet Arnau. And this came up in a very funny way. I had a viewer comment and ask if I had ever read this book, and I had not. However, just a few days before that comment came in, I had actually seen a description of this book and was like, ooh, that sounds really good. This is a book that I need to keep my eye out on. I don't know that much about this story itself, except I believe it tells the story of a young woman also in sort of a Midwest setting who is just, you know, sort of going to do whatever she needs to do to survive and to keep her family together. I believe it happens around the time of industrialization in the US. And so her and her husband sort of leave the country and move to the city and have a whole sort of another set of struggles there. That's my horrible description of what I think this book is about. Anyway, a viewer then kindly sent it to me. Thank you. And yeah, I'm not going to say her name because I don't think I asked her if it was okay if I said her name, but you know who you are, so thank you so much. And yeah, this is one of the books that, you know, because somebody took the time to send it to me, I'd really like to get to it before the year is over. We'll see. Like I said, I don't know that I'll get to any of these, but in theory, I'm prioritizing them. Number six is another book that was recommended, I think after I finished like gushing about David Copperfield one time. Or maybe it was after I read some other Charles Dickens. It doesn't matter. I had somebody recommend this to me as being their favorite Charles Dickens novel, and supposedly we're buddy reading it at some point towards the end of the year, November, December. December's looking better. And that would be Nicholas Nickleby. Again, another book that I don't know that much about, but I did get it in what has become my favorite classics edition, which is Tor. They make mass market paperback versions of classics, and the reason I love them is because, I don't know, there's just something about the covers that they do that just pleases some part of the like 80s child in me, and 90s. It just depends, but they're all amazing pictures. Anyway, this is described on the front as life in a dreary boarding school leads a young man to adventures in merry London. So I'm looking forward to reading this, especially if we're able to do it as a buddy read. So yeah. And now for my top five books. These are the five books that I am like really most excited to get to, and I have to say are probably most likely to get to, because between the sort of 2 months that there will be left to read these, November and December, I figure if I do just two of these a month, I'll have read most of them. And the first one would be Zeno's Conscience. I have mentioned this book quite a bit ever since I moved this summer. It was the book that I started as an audiobook on my move here to where I currently live, and I was really enjoying it, but the audiobook was so soothing, the way the narrator told it, that I was literally falling asleep, like, while driving. Like, I wasn't falling asleep while driving, but I was getting tired. And I was determined that I was going to buy this book. I actually found it in a bookstore within the first week or two of moving, and I was super excited to get a physical edition of it because one of the bookstores I had checked out said that a new edition was coming out and therefore they wouldn't have it in stock for who knows how long. Anyway, yeah, I cannot wait to get back into the story. I completely plan on starting it from the beginning because it was that enjoyable, and I knew I was missing stuff because I was listening to it on audiobook. Zeno's Conscience basically tells the story of Zeno, and it's just his ramblings about his life in his journal, and he's just supposed to be writing down his thoughts about his previous life to help him maybe understand how he got to this point. So, yeah, all I can say is I can't wait to get back to some last cigarettes. The next one is a series that I can't wait to finish. Shocking for me because I don't tend to like series, but I really enjoyed the first book in this one. So I can't wait to get back to Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. I read Parable of the Sower earlier this year on the date that that book starts. And yeah, I wasn't sure what I would think about that book. I have read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, and man, was that book harsh. Parable of the Sower was also pretty like devastatingly sad and harsh and depressing, but somehow not quite as brutal as Kindred. And I found it really fascinating. It was a piece of science fiction dystopian, which I do tend to really enjoy that genre, but it was just a very different take on it, much more philosophical than I was thinking it was going to be, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I can't wait to continue the story and see what happens next. And so this is the next book on my list. Bringing me to my top three books. Book number 3 is A Room with a View. So excited about this book. So I also read earlier this summer, I read some good books over the summer, I have to admit. I read Howard's End earlier this summer and absolutely loved it. Like, that book is still definitely in contention for best book of the year. But that sounds like a good place to be. A Room with a View is, for some people, their favorite Forster book, and I like it better than Howard's End. And I have heard people go back and forth about the two. Needless to say, these two books seem to be their favorites of his. I'm really interested to see what camp I'm going to be in, and I keep occasionally hear people talk about this book, and it just makes me want to read it more and more. What is this book about? No clue. Have you noticed a theme here? These are all books that, like, are typically, I guess, books that I want to read because of other books that I've read that are like them or that are by the same author, or maybe I started them, but they're books that I don't know much about. So that could be dangerous, but I don't know. This one I don't think is dangerous. It's a shorter book. I feel like I definitely should get this before the end of the year. I love this cover. I'm excited. What's not to be excited about with this? Book number 2 is a book that I almost have to read before the end of the year, and that would be The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. So, yeah, this really needs to get on my TBR because in the middle of November, so very soon, I am going to see the opera of The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. This will be a reread for me, but I read this back in high school, and I really want a refresher on the book so that I can do like a book to opera adaptation. It's still strange to me that it's made into opera, but I think it's going to be amazing. And the number one book that I most want to get to and feel like just has to make it onto the TBR and get read, whether it's on there or not. Can you guess what it is at this point? It's Drood by Dan Simmons. Okay. If I don't get to this book by the end of the year, like, what am I doing with my time? What am I doing with my life? And what else did I read? This book has been on my TBR all year, since before last year. In fact, I posted a video called The Druth Project. I'm pretty sure that was one of the first videos I posted on my channel at all. And I've now almost had my channel a year. That anniversary is coming up, so yay. But I still haven't read this book. And I have read so many books so that I can read this book. I'll put those up on the screen. That it has to happen. I can't possibly finish this year. I'm definitely going to finish a year on BookTube without having read this book, but I can't finish an entire year, calendar year, 12 months, without having finally gotten to this book. I am currently in the middle of reading Our Mutual Friend, which I swear is the last book I'm going to read before I get to this. It's got to happen, guys. It's just got to happen. But I do have kind of like a baker's dozen 2 extra bonus books for you. And these are just books that while I was going through trying to decide what my 10 books were, these were the 2 that just got bumped off at the end. And I don't know, I still really kind of want to fit them in. And those books are The Tartar Step by Dino Buzzati. And thank you to the person who mentioned that there is a new translation of this out. I also want to get that because I love reading books in multiple translations. And George's, because this poor book has been on and off my TBR so many times and got knocked off of this TBR. So yeah, if I could get this in before the end of the year, that would be great too. So let's do a book stack because I feel like I haven't shown one of those in a while and it's always satisfying. Okay, here we go in all its grandeur. Here are the 10 plus 2 books, not in the order I told you, in the order that I hopefully won't drop them, books that I want to read before the end of the year. So that's it for me. Let me know what 10 books you would like to get to before the end of the year. And if we have any in common, let me know. Maybe we can buddy read them. Or maybe we can make a Barnacle buddy read out of one of these. And yeah, that's it for today. Ooh. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye. I have to admit. And the yard work is starting just outside the window. I mean, it's been going on, but now you might actually hear it because something has been revved up. Anyway, work quickly, not against me. Oh no. So this happens. Okay. It's okay. All right. Do other people have shorter books when they do this? Maybe this is why I stopped doing this. I would like to read before the end of the year. Hi, I'm filming. Carefully reach the stop button.